And who is this supposed to be? My new aide? You must be joking, Colonel. She looks like she just graduated high school. The words, laced with the casual cruelty of unchecked authority, boomed across the sun-bleached parade ground of Fort Sheridan. Brigadier General Marcus Thorne, a man whose physical presence was as loud as his voice, gestured with a dismissive flick of his wrist towards the woman standing at a perfect, almost unnervingly still parade rest. The assembled crowd, a meticulously woven tapestry of military tradition and starched uniforms, reacted with a predictable ripple of nervous energy. A few sycophantic junior officers near the front let out forced, clipped laughs, while the seasoned NCOs further back simply stared forward, their faces impassive masks that betrayed nothing but decades of practice in enduring the whims of command. The woman at the center of this sudden, uncomfortable spotlight did not react. She didn't flinch, her gaze didn't shift, her breathing didn't hitch. Her eyes remained fixed on the distant horizon, her focus absolute. She was a study in deliberate neutrality, her uniform immaculate but unadorned, lacking the constellation of ribbons and medals that adorned Thorne's chest. She was, to all outward appearances, a blank slate, a cipher. But when the base commander, Colonel David Chun, a man known for his quiet observation, saw her stance, the subtle, perfect distribution of her weight, the relaxed readiness in her hands, he felt a flicker of something profound, a memory of a file he'd read late one night, a file filled with black ink and classified warnings. He knew this was no ordinary officer. If you believe true strength is proven not by the volume of one's voice, but by the depth of one's character, type competence below. The silence that followed Thorne's insult was heavy, thick with the unspoken rules of military hierarchy. He had drawn a line in the sand, establishing his dominance before the formal change of command ceremony had even truly begun. He saw himself as a titan of modern warfare, a man whose career was a testament to aggressive, decisive action, and he viewed any deviation from his archetype with suspicion and contempt. This woman, with her quiet demeanor and unassuming frame, was an affront to his entire worldview. He took another step closer, his shadow falling over her, a physical act of intimidation meant to cow her into submission. "I ask you a question, Lieutenant, or whatever you are," he snarled, intentionally demoting her with his words. "What is your function here? Who authorized a staff aide to stand on my reception line? This is a place for warriors, not secretaries again." The woman offered no verbal response. Her stillness was her answer. It was not the frozen stillness of fear, but the deep, centered calm of a mountain peak, unbothered by the storm raging at its base. The narrator could almost describe the internal process, the slowing of her heart rate, the deliberate cataloging of environmental details, the position of the sun, the direction of the wind, the exact distance to every person on the dais. It was a state of being, a level of situational awareness, so ingrained it was as natural as breathing. The crowd's discomfort deepened. The initial, nervous amusement had curdled into a palpable sense of embarrassment for the institution itself. They were witnessing a gross and public abuse of power, a general berating an unknown subordinate for no discernible reason other than his own prejudice. Colonel Chin watched, his expression hardening. He recognized Thorne's behavior for what it was, the brittle confidence of a man who measured worth in decibels and decorations. But he also saw something else. He saw the way the woman's shoulders remained perfectly relaxed, a sign not of disrespect, but of a total lack of threat perception. Thorne was not a threat to her. He was an obstacle, a piece of loud, malfunctioning equipment that needed to be navigated. Shin remembered the specific phrase from the redacted file. Operator displays a preternatural state of calm under extreme duress. To be considered a primary indicator of operational readiness, this was not an aid. This was something else entirely. Thorne, however, was incapable of such nuance. He saw her silence as insolence, her calm as weakness. It was the final confirmation he needed. He decided this public lesson required a physical component. He would not strike her, not in the brutish sense, but he would physically remove her. He would take her by the arm and escort her off his stage, cementing his authority in a way words no longer could. He reached out, his large, manicured hand aiming for her shoulder, a gesture of absolute dismissal. The movement was telegraphed, aggressive, and filled with the certainty of a man who had never been physically challenged in his professional life. For the hundreds of soldiers watching, time seemed to fracture into 1,000 tiny shards. They saw the general's arm extend, the fabric of his uniform pulling taut across his shoulder. They saw the woman, still motionless, a statue about to be desecrated. They braced for the inevitable, for the quiet humiliation to be made physical, for the ugly scene to reach its unfortunate conclusion. But then, reality diverged from expectation with a speed that defied physics. The woman did not step back. She did not raise her hands in a defensive block. Instead, she moved. It was not a large movement, not a dramatic display of martial prowess. It was a subtle, almost imperceptible shift, a pivot on the ball of her left foot that rotated her entire body a mere 15 degrees. Her right hand, which had been resting at her side, came up in a fluid arc, not to strike, but to meet his wrist. Her fingers did not grab or clutch. They simply made contact, finding the precise intersection of bone and nerve with the gentle certainty of a surgeon. Simultaneously, her left hand brushed against his elbow. It was a touch, nothing more. But in that single, coordinated action, a universe of biomechanical knowledge was unleashed. She did not absorb his momentum. She redirected it. She borrowed the force of his own aggressive lunge and guided it, folding his arm inward upon itself in a way that was anatomically possible but neurologically baffling to him. His forward motion was not stopped, but seamlessly converted into a rotational vector that spun him a quarter turn, his own body's energy used to break his posture and disrupt his balance. He found himself stumbling, his arm locked in a position of utter helplessness, all before his brain could even process the first signal of contact. The entire sequence, from the start of his lunge to his staggering recovery, took less than half a second. It was an act of such sublime, economical efficiency that it barely registered as an act of self-defense. It was more like a magic trick, a physical paradox that left every witness questioning the evidence of their own eyes. The parade ground fell into a silence, so profound it felt like a physical pressure. The rustling of the flags, the distant hum of base traffic, the very air itself seemed to have been sucked into a vacuum. Every single soldier, from the lowest private to the highest-ranking officer on the dais, stood frozen, their minds struggling to reconcile what they had just seen. Thorne, now a few feet away from her, stared at his own hand, flexing his fingers as if to ensure they were still connected to his arm. There was no pain, only a strange, tingling numbness and the ghostly memory of a pressure he couldn't comprehend. His face, which had been a mask of crimson rage, was now a canvas of pale, slack-jawed disbelief. The arrogance had been wiped away, replaced by a raw, primal confusion. He looked at the woman, who had already returned to her original position of parade rest, her expression as placid and unreadable as before. It was as if nothing had happened at all, which only made the event more terrifying. The utter lack of effort, the absence of aggression, the clinical precision of the maneuver. It spoke of a level of skill so far beyond his comprehension that it felt alien. He tried to speak, to bluster, to regain control, but the only sound that escaped his lips was a dry, croaking whisper. "Ow!" He began, but the word died in his throat. He had built his entire identity on a foundation of physical presence and overt power, and in a single, silent, fleeting moment, this unassuming woman had demolished it completely. The shockwave of that half-second interaction radiated outwards, traveling through the ranks with the speed of a battlefield communique. The initial whispers of "Did you see that?" were quickly replaced by a stunned, reverent quiet. The collective consciousness of the formation had shifted. They were no longer watching a general bully a subordinate. They were witnessing a mystery unfold, a fundamental law of their universe being rewritten before their very eyes. The power dynamic on the stage had been irrevocably inverted. General Thorne, for all his medals and bluster, now looked small, his authority a hollow shell. The woman, in her stark simplicity, seemed to have grown in stature, her silence now imbued with an almost mythic weight. She was no longer a blank slate. She was a question, and every soldier on that field was desperate for the answer. It was into this deafening silence, that Colonel David Chun chose to move. He had seen everything, and unlike the others, he was not just shocked. He was validated. The subtle clues he had noticed earlier, the stance, the calm, the economic stillness, had been the prologue. The impossible, fluid defense was the climax. Now, it was his duty to provide the epilogue. He strode forward with a purpose that commanded attention, his polished boots marking a steady rhythm on the asphalt. He did not look at Thorn. His focus was entirely on the woman. The tension on the parade ground was now of a different sort. It was no longer the uncomfortable tension of a public shaming, but the electric anticipation of a great reveal. The soldiers in the formation held their breath, their training and discipline the only things keeping them from openly gaping at the drama unfolding. They sensed that they were about to become part of a story that would be told in the barracks and NCO clubs for years to come, a new piece of Fort Sheridan folklore being written in real time. Thorn, seeing Chun approach, made a desperate attempt to reclaim the narrative. He straightened his uniform, a flicker of his old arrogance returning. "Colonel," he barked, his voice still a bit shaky, "remove this person from the dais. Her conduct is insubordinate." Chin didn't even break stride. He walked past the general as if he were a piece of furniture, stopping directly in front of the woman. For a moment, he simply looked at her, and in his eyes, there was a deep, profound respect that bordered on awe. He had spent 30 years in the service of his country, had seen true heroes in action, and he knew he was standing in the presence of one now. The atmosphere was thick with unspoken questions. Who was she? Where did she come from? How could she possess a skill so refined it seemed supernatural? Colonel Chun cleared his throat, but instead of addressing the woman or the general, he turned slightly to face his own command sergeant major, a man whose face was a roadmap of deployments and whose judgment was beyond reproach. "Sergeant Major," Chun said, his voice clear and steady, resonating with the authority of the base commander, "get me the Omega file." Immediately, the command sergeant major, a man who moved with the deliberate pace of a glacier, snapped to attention with a speed that startled those nearby. The term Omega file was not standard military jargon. It was a designation known only to a select few, referring to the highest level of classified personnel records, files that contained information so sensitive they were kept separate from the main digital systems, often existing only on secure, isolated servers. It was a file for ghosts, for operators whose very existence was a matter of national security. The sergeant major nodded once, a gesture of complete understanding, and strode off the dais with a mission. The wait, which was only a minute or two, felt like an eternity. During that time, Colonel Chun stood his ground, a silent guardian between Thorn and the woman, his very presence a shield. He used the time to let the lesson marinate. He slowly scanned the faces of the officers and NCOs in the front rows, his gaze lingering on the ones who had laughed at Thorn's initial insults. His look was not one of anger, but of profound disappointment. He was the custodian of this base, responsible for the morale and discipline of every soldier on it, and he had just witnessed a catastrophic failure of leadership and character. He knew this moment needed to be more than a rebuke. It needed to be a permanent course correction, a lesson etched into the institutional memory of Fort Sheridan. The command sergeant major returned, not with a file, but with a ruggedized military tablet, which he handed to Colonel Chun. Chun took it, his eyes never leaving Thorn's. He held the tablet up, not so anyone could see the screen, but as a symbol, a physical manifestation of the truth he was about to unleash. He looked directly at the bewildered and humiliated general, his voice dropping to a low, powerful register that carried across the parade ground with chilling clarity. "General Thorn," he began, "in our profession, we make assumptions. It's a survival instinct. We assume a soldier in a clean uniform is disciplined. We assume a chest full of medals indicates experience. But we are taught from our very first day in basic training that assumptions can be fatal. Today, you made a fatal assumption." He tapped the screen of the tablet. The silence was absolute. Every soldier leaned forward, straining to hear. Chin took a deep breath, his role shifting from that of a commander to that of a historian, revealing a legend that had, until this moment, walked among them in total anonymity. "You asked who this is," Chin said, his gaze finally shifting to the woman, his voice now filled with a respect that was almost reverent. Her name is Major Evelyn Reed. He paused, letting the ranks sink in. A major, not a lieutenant, not an aide. A field-grade officer. A murmur went through the crowd. Thorne's face tightened, his public error now compounded. But Chun was just getting started. That, however, is merely her administrative designation, he continued, his eyes returning to the tablet. Her operational file is different. He began to read, his voice a steady, rhythmic cadence that hammered home the reality of the woman standing before them. Unit classification, Tier 1 Special Mission Unit, detached. Primary operational designator. Phantom, another wave of shock rippled through the formation. Tier 1, the elite of the elite, the tip of the spear, operators who existed in the shadows and undertook missions the public would never know about. Special qualifications, Chun went on, his voice gaining momentum. Master Instructor, Hand-to-Hand Defensive Systems, Fort Bragg. Senior Operator and Tactical Planner, Joint Special Operations Command. Graduate of every advanced survival, evasion, resistance, and escape school our military has to offer. Fluent in 4 languages. Over 2,000 hours of documented combat experience in denied areas. He paused again, letting the weight of those qualifications settle over the stunned audience. 2,000 combat hours. Most soldiers, even decorated combat veterans, were lucky to have a few hundred. Thorne's own impressive record paled in comparison. Chun looked up from the tablet, his eyes boring into Thorne's. You questioned her right to be on this dais. Among warriors general, Major Reed has forgotten more about being a warrior than most of us will ever learn. He swiped a finger across the screen. Awards and decorations include the Bronze Star with V4 Valor 4 times, the Silver Star twice, the Distinguished Service Cross. A collective, audible gasp swept across the parade ground. The Distinguished Service Cross was the second highest military award for valor, surpassed only by the Medal of Honor. To have one was to be a living legend. To have one and walk around with a bare uniform, seeking no recognition, was a level of humility that was almost incomprehensible. Chun saved the most devastating blow for last. He straightened to his full height, his voice ringing with the final, unassailable authority of command. And pursuant to Presidential Order 7-4, Alpha, concerning command structure for Operation Sundown, Major Reed is here as a direct representative of the Joint Chiefs. In her capacity as a mission-level strategic advisor for this theater, her operational authority temporarily supersedes all ranks below the 4-star level. He let the words hang in the air for a moment. That includes yours, Brigadier General. He then turned, facing Major Reed squarely. In a move that sent a thunderclap of shock through every person present, Colonel David Chun, a decorated and respected full colonel, a man who commanded thousands, snapped to the most rigid, perfect salute of his long career. The sound of his hand striking his brow cover was like a gunshot in the silence. Major Reed, he said, his voice thick with emotion and profound respect. Ma'am, on behalf of the command, I apologize for the unprofessional reception you have received. The ceremony was concluded with a stilted, awkward haste. The change of command was official, but the real transfer of power had already occurred on that sun-drenched patch of asphalt. As soon as the formations were dismissed, the story erupted. It didn't just spread, it detonated. It moved like wildfire through the barracks, across the mess hall tables, over encrypted comms channels, and into the hushed, wood-paneled confines of the officers' club. Every telling embellished the details, polishing the raw facts into the gleaming surface of a legend. By lunchtime, the half-second biomechanical redirection of force had become an almost supernatural event. Some said she never even touched him, that she had merely looked at him, and he stumbled. Others swore they saw a flicker of blue energy. The story of her file, as recited by Colonel Chun, became a litany of heroic deeds, each medal and qualification a chapter in an epic saga of a ghost who walked the lonely frontiers of national security. The name, Phantom Reed, was on everyone's lips, spoken with a mixture of fear, awe, and a newfound, fervent respect. The entire culture of the base seemed to recalibrate itself in a matter of hours. The usual barracks chatter about sports and weekend plans was replaced by intense debates about the nature of true strength. The incident became an instant parable, a powerful, real-world lesson that accomplished more for institutional humility than 1,000 PowerPoint presentations on leadership ever could. Arrogant young lieutenants who modeled themselves after the Thorne archetype were suddenly quieter, more observant. Seasoned sergeants used the story to hammer home the importance of judging a soldier by their actions, not their appearance. The phrase, "don't get read-ed," quickly entered the local lexicon, a shorthand warning against making foolish assumptions. And Major Evelyn Reed herself? She simply vanished. She did not attend the formal reception. She was not seen in the mess hall or at the headquarters building. She retreated back into the anonymity that was her natural habitat. She was in a small, windowless temporary office deep within the base's intelligence center. Her focus already shifted to the complex geopolitical problem she had been sent to Fort Sheridan to solve. The incident on the parade ground was, to her, a minor, unplanned deviation. It was a tactical problem that had presented itself and had been dealt with using the minimum amount of force necessary. It registered in her mind not as a moment of personal vindication, but as an inefficient use of time that had unfortunately drawn unwanted attention. Her world was not defined by ranks or egos, but by mission objectives and threat assessments. General Thorne was no longer a threat. Therefore, he no longer occupied any space in her thoughts. Her silence, which Thorne had so badly misinterpreted, was now understood by all. It was not the silence of timidity, but the focused quiet of the consummate professional, the deep calm of someone who carries immense responsibility and possesses the skills to meet it. Her anonymity was not a sign of insignificance, but a requirement of her trade. She was a phantom, and the legend growing around her was nothing more than the wake left by her passage, a ripple in the water that proved she had been there, changing things in ways most would never fully understand. The fallout for Brigadier General Marcus Thorne was both immediate and devastating. He was not formally reprimanded, not in a way that would ever appear on paper. The military often handles its internal embarrassments with a quiet, bloodless efficiency. But his career was over. The story reached the Pentagon before his flight back had even landed. A man so easily and publicly undone by his own arrogance could not be trusted with the lives of soldiers or the delicate art of modern warfare. He was reassigned to a desk job, a meaningless position in a forgotten corner of the bureaucracy, where he would serve out his time until a quiet, unceremonious retirement. The true transformation, however, was internal. In the weeks that followed, Thorne was forced to confront the shattered remnants of his own identity. Every medal on his chest now felt like a mockery, a testament to his superficial understanding of strength. He replayed the moment on the parade ground 1,000 times in his mind, not with anger, but with a growing, horrifying clarity. He saw not an enemy, but a teacher. Major Reed's fluid, effortless defense was a physical manifestation of a wisdom he had never possessed. Her silence was a language he had never bothered to learn. One evening, alone in his temporary quarters, he took out a single sheet of official stationery and a fountain pen. He wrote a letter, not as a general, but as a man. It was a short, direct, and profoundly sincere apology to Major Reed. He didn't make excuses or attempt to justify his behavior. He simply acknowledged his arrogance, his prejudice, and the deep professional lesson she had taught him. He sent it through official channels, knowing it might never even reach her. A week later, a single sheet of paper came back to him. It contained only 2 words, typed in a simple block font. Lesson acknowledged. For Thorne, it was a form of absolution. A symbolic artifact of the event soon appeared on the base. In the main NCO Academy classroom, where young sergeants were trained in the art of leadership, a new, framed photograph was hung on the wall. It wasn't a picture of Major Reed. No such official photo existed. Instead, it was a long-lens shot taken by a soldier in the crowd, capturing the exact moment Colonel Chun was saluting her. You couldn't see her face clearly, but you could see the crisp, unwavering salute of the base commander and the stark, unadorned uniform of the woman receiving it. Beneath the photo, a simple brass plaque was mounted. It read, "Respect the competence, not the volume." The spot on the parade ground where she had stood was never officially marked, but the soldiers knew. It became an unofficial landmark, a piece of sacred ground. New lieutenants were quietly taken there by their platoon sergeants and told the story, a modern military fable about the dangers of pride and the power of the quiet professional. The legend of Phantom Reed became a permanent part of the base's identity, a reminder that the most dangerous weapon in any arsenal is an underestimated soldier. A year passed. Fort Sheridan was a different place. The cultural shift that began on that hot, tense afternoon had taken root and blossomed. The new institutional narrative, reinforced daily by sergeants and commanders who had been there, was one of profound respect for skill in all its forms. The loud, aggressive style of leadership once embodied by General Thorne was now seen as antiquated and inefficient. The new ideal was the Reed model: calm, quiet, hyper-competent, and mission-focused. The story had become a foundational text, a teaching tool used to instruct new arrivals on the core values of the modern military. A grizzled first sergeant, addressing a formation of fresh-faced privates on that very same parade ground, would point to the spot. Right there, he'd say, his voice low and serious, is where a general learned that assumptions can end a career. He saw a small woman in a plain uniform. What he failed to see was the deadliest person on this continent. Remember that. The soldier next to you might not look like a hero from a movie, but you have no idea the crucible they've walked through. You salute the rank, yes, but you give your respect to the professional, and professionalism has no gender, no size, and no volume. We get one final, fleeting glimpse of Major Evelyn Reed. She is thousands of miles away, briefing a small team of elite operators in a dimly lit hangar. Her appearance is unchanged, unassuming, anonymous. She speaks in a low, calm voice, outlining a complex infiltration plan with flawless precision. Her team, composed of the most hardened and capable soldiers in the world, listens with an almost religious reverence. They do not see a major. They see Phantom, the architect of impossible missions, the calm center of storm. Her legacy was never about the public humiliation of a single general. It was about the quiet, continuous work of protecting her country and empowering those around her to be better, more thoughtful warriors. The ripples from that day on the parade ground continue to spread, not because of her actions, but because of the standard she embodied, a standard that others now strove to meet. True strength does not need to announce its presence. It is felt in its effects. True authority is not seized through intimidation. It is granted by those who recognize superior competence and unwavering character. The story of Major Evelyn Reed and Brigadier General Marcus Thorne serves as an enduring testament to this fundamental truth. It is a reminder that in any organization, in any walk of life, the loudest voice in the room is often the one with the least to say. Respect is not a function of volume, but of value. It is earned in the silent, tireless pursuit of excellence, proven in moments of crisis, and bestowed upon those who demonstrate, through their actions alone, that they are worthy of it. The legacy of that day was not about what one woman did, but about what she represented, the unassailable power of quiet competence. That single, silent moment on the parade ground continues to echo, a permanent lesson that the most profound impact is often made by those who make the least noise. For more stories where quiet competence triumphs over loud assumption, and where silent professionalism defines true worth, subscribe to Unknown Heroine Tales.